Hi, and good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another program with Education Matters. We are here on the eve of Halloween itself, an eve, Hallow Eve, All Hallows Eve. So on Tuesday at 6 o'clock, if you're watching this, you're watching live. The call-in number is 640-3091. That is 640-3091. 1 week from tonight will be the elections for governor and for Congress and for Executive Council and for our House and Senate. And like I was saying for the last number of weeks, I encourage you to go out and vote. It is important. And so please, next week, the polls are open until 7 p.m. on Tuesday the 6th. Please go out and vote. It is vitally important that people do. When you look at some of I've talked about the nature of some of the people that we have representing us in Concord right now, and the most recent episode is the allegations against the House member, a House member from Derry, who seemingly, I don't know how this ever. It's incredible, but was involved in producing an adult pornography movie in California, and is being sued as a result. I don't know where these people come from. It seems to know no boundaries in terms of geography or anything else, and so. The barrier to entry seems quite low, especially for the House in Concord. So we need to pay real attention and to vote for people who are upright and reputable and capable. To that end, I will have a couple of representatives who are running to represent wards in Manchester who will be joining us a little later. And we'll introduce them, but it's up to everybody to do their own diligence. As far as education is concerned, I can't stress enough the fact that we have public representatives in Manchester who have consistently voted against the interests of Manchester public schools. Now, in fairness, they may not see it that way because they would call themselves I think, they would use terms like school choice advocates and other such words. And if we take them at their word, and we probably should, that's the intent of their votes when they vote against, vote for programs that will take money away from Manchester. I don't get beyond the first case, which is that as representatives of the people of Manchester voted into office by the people of Manchester, they are up in Concord and they are voting to take money away that would otherwise come to the city of Manchester. That affects the pocketbooks, the properties, property owners here in Manchester. So to me, it's just an easy decision. It's wrong, and shouldn't be supported. And then if you go beyond that, that's just tightly on education. But if you look at things like the attack on marriage equality or on LGBTQ rights or all the other things, depending on where your particular point of view is. But if those things concern you, make no mistake that is going on with a constant barrage. And then we have the continuing attacks on public education more generally, where there's a constant effort to dumb down, to minimize the amount of effort that the state is putting into public education, which is the exact opposite of what our city and our state requires. So Manchester people need to pay attention. The first question to people is, will you vote in favour of Manchester public schools? And you will get dragged down conversations about private schools and homeschooling and religious schools, and people can support those in any way they want to one degree or another. Let's just move beyond that and stick with the question about Manchester public schools. Will you undertake as a public representative to do nothing that will undermine Manchester public schools? That would be the key question. With that in mind, I'd like to just go to our each week I like to mention what is coming up in the district, and we have the opportunities to meet with Dr. Vargas and speak with him with his coffee and conversations. There are none this week, but next week, at the day after the election on November 7th, there is at 7:30 in the morning. We'll have Parker Varney. He'll be at Parker Varney Elementary School at 7:30 a.m. And then the following afternoon on November 8th at 4:30, he will be at Memorial High School at 4:30 p.m. So we're going to be joined by a couple of people who are running for office here in the city of Manchester, and they were delayed in getting here because of the travails of trying to find parking, etc. So we're going to do this live, folks, because that's the way we roll. Hi, Jackie. How are you? And it is. How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet you again.
Yes,
So welcome. So. Let me just finish on my. You're very welcome. So the meetings that are ongoing with the superintendent, an opportunity to meet. Remember, when the superintendent they're usually accompanied by the principal, vice principal, and some of the teachers in each of those schools. So again, on November 7th at 7:30 in the morning at Parker Varney, and on November 8th at 4:30 in the afternoon are the next, and that's at Memorial High School. Those are the next two opportunities, and then. With regard to Manchester Proud, has a whole series of events coming in, and I'll be talking about Manchester Proud a little later. But there are a lot of opportunities to engage with Manchester Proud. You can go to manchesterproud.org and online there, and you can partake in the survey, which is, this is a community group that's looking for the opinions and ideas of the community, and so you can go online and fill out their questionnaire or survey. There are also multiple opportunities to visit with them, and they've just begun a period of going out into the schools to visit with the schools. And if you actually go and if you go to the website, look under community events, there are a whole series of them coming up. The first one that I see on the list here, without going through it all, remember, go to Manchester Proud. Don't do what I did and went to Manchester Pride. Manchester Proud. Well, you could do that too, but Manchester Proud. .org. The first one, there's one at 9:15 to 10:15 is a MST, Manchester School of Technology listening session on November 1st, and you'll see when you look at these, some of them are for the staff, some are for the public, some are for principals and for others. So look down at your list. There's lots of opportunities. All right, without further ado, I'm delighted to be joined by Jackie Innes. Welcome to Education Matters.
For having us.
You're very, very welcome. So the big day is almost upon us. You guys must be working hard.
Yes, absolutely. We actually just came from a postcard labeling party.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That's why we're running a bit.
That's fine. I'm very pleased that you're able to join us. And to remember again, folks who are watching this, that if you're watching live, it's Tuesday the 30th. But because the show is carried 7 or 8 or 9 times again over the week, you could, if you're watching this as late as it will be on early on Tuesday of the 6th, you should be, packing yourself up and getting ready to go to the polls, because the polls are open till 7 p.m. I think they start at 6 a.m. Is that right? Yep. 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Get out and vote. It's really important. So. If you'd like to start perhaps by introducing yourselves to the people in Manchester, let us know who you are and how you got to be running for you're both running to represent us in the House. Okay, so Jackie, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I sort of start with my 3 bullet points. So I'm a PhD bioscientist. I'm a mom of 3 kids, and I grew up here in Manchester. So I care very much about the future of the state, and especially our, long-term commitments to the environment and sound evidence-based policy in all venues. I think, growing up here in New Hampshire, I'd always been very interested in politics. My senior year of high school was the 2000 presidential primaries,
oh, wow.
So we got to meet lots and lots of candidates.
Right.
I remember Alan Keyes, Steve Forbes. Yeah, so politics kind of always been in my blood, and
This is your first time running?
It is, yes, my first time.
Welcome to the fray.
Thank you.
Good. And we'll talk about education in a second. If you'd like to introduce yourself, you can address, I think this camera, the one that sort of talks directly to the people, but
Sure.
we're not too formal about that, but,
Sure. Well, thank you again for having us, Jim.
You're very welcome.
My name's Iz. I'm running for state rep in Ward 2. We're both Ward 2 residents. Jackie is running in the Floterial district, which covers Wards 1, 2, and 3. I'm just in Ward 2. So, but if you're in Ward 2, you can vote for both of our names. My background is as an attorney. That's my day job. I've been an attorney for 3 years. I'm a native of New Hampshire. I'm from Milford originally, and now in obviously Ward 2 for a few years. So, again, a first-time candidate for myself. It's something I've thought about doing since I was in high school, since I took a course in constitutional law and civics, and just got really interested in politics and law, and finally had the opportunity to do it. It's something that we're very lucky in New Hampshire to have a volunteer legislature that we can, normal working people like Jackie and I are able to try to balance that and contribute towards the legislative process here. So
Good. Well, excellent, and likewise, welcome to the fray. I've been speaking. Some people would call it other things. I've been, first of all, advocating for people to get out and vote. But and our house, the people who represent us in Concord, I think there's a level of dysfunctionality that's going on there, and I don't want to waste anybody's time here. Like, this is not probably the right venue, although we can talk about anything, but I don't want to waste time about individual cases and stuff, but it keeps on happening. My observation about the House is that, in particular, is that there are a lot of strange characters, and we should thank everybody who runs for public office and gives up their time. It is a volunteer legislature, as you said, but at the same time, we have the average age of people representing us in Concord is it's 60 something, I believe, 66. I think I heard the other day. That's the average. So having some new blood and new faces and new ideas will be will be a good thing. Let me ask you, so that's one of many Jim editorials. Let's talk about education, especially education in the city of Manchester. You mentioned you have 3 kids. What age are they, and which school do they go to?
Yeah, so my daughter is 8 years old, and I have twin boys who are both 5. So 3rd grade and kindergarten at Smith Road.
Smith
Elementary.
Road.
Yeah.
All right, good. And do you have kids in the system? Do you have kids in that?
no kids yet.
No. Okay, so as far as education is concerned, I'd like to talk about that, especially because for 2 reasons. First of all, the show is called Education Matters. But secondly, it has become more and more apparent to me over time that which is decided in Concord is having a huge impact on Manchester schools. And generally, over the last 10-year period at minimum, it has been a continuing degradation of support. And that has gone on at the state level as well. So would either of you like to jump in and talk about where you are in education and how you're going to what you intend to do or what you're going to fight for?
Sure. Well, I think we're both on the same page. We're all on the same page that we need more funding for our schools, and especially from the state level. We're having the dual effect of less funding from the state, which equals less funding for our schools, A, B, more burden on the local property taxpayer,
right,
which is unfair to our kids and unfair to our taxpayers at the same time. So more support from the state is a starting point and something we desperately need.
Yeah, and I think more support from the state level sort of across the board. I mean, they used to contribute much more to pensions
Right.
than they do now, and that, again, puts a burden on the property taxes, which then squeezes everything, but I think schools in particular. So,
I mean, these are difficult topics because, with scarce resources, the allocation of resources, making decisions about where that money is spent, etc. But, we've seen when you mentioned the pension issue, so just on the school side in Manchester, this coming year, it will be close to $5 million is the value of what's been passed down for the state pension center system in cost. It was $4 million something last year, so it is a minimum of that and approaching 5, and that's on an annual basis. And for a ballpark number, because the way our teachers are compensated, we use a number of about, because new teachers are the cheapest, for want of a way of putting it. They may be the best qualified sometimes academically, but taking nothing away from our well-established teachers. But we use a number of about 50,000 per teacher, so that's about 20 teachers per million. So the decision made in Concord to pass down the cost is about represents about 100 teachers more in our schools that the taxpayers either would have today or less that they would have to pay. So it has a huge effect. The other issue is that there's been an ongoing attack on public education. Education is politicized like crazy. I mean, and so there are lots. If you jump in the deep end, be careful of whatever bearing gifts kind of thing, because everybody's got an agenda. I have one myself. I want great public schools, and
I'll sign on to that.
and I want them well funded. But we've seen there's the privatization, the voucher bill, which is again sort of seen as low hanging fruit. But again, the voucher bill as proposed would take money away from the city of Manchester. What about education as far as the college system, which you'll be directly involved in funding, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, I can say I moved out of state to go to college because the difference between attending a private university in Massachusetts and going to UNH was minimal, and ended up going to California for my PhD, and then I came back. But a lot of my friends who made the same choice and would be fantastic additions to Manchester didn't. They, met people in their college days or afterward, and then they settled down, where they moved out to. So I think, yes, I think our students having the highest college debt is bad for retaining, and then it's also bad for even the people who stay here. If we have so much debt, there's entrepreneurial risks that you can't take when you're worried about college loans.
And the two things
like
they're separate, but they would go together, which is one that we have the most expensive in-state tuition for a university. I've got a son at UNH. It's a great institution, but my two daughters are out of state. I have two daughters up at Syracuse. I'll be delighted wherever they end up if they're happy, but, it's very likely they'll follow a scenario like you've already mentioned and end up working in wherever, and it's a loss to Manchester and a loss to... But the two things that go together, one is that we've got the highest cost per year for in-state tuition for state schools, and of course, as a result, perhaps, but separately, our students in New Hampshire have got the highest college debt of any kids. Let me go to another place that has to do with sort of economic development in the city or in the state. And I commingle the city and state quite a lot, and it's a little arrogant to sort of think that way. But I do. It's based on it is thought about, because I am convinced that as Manchester goes, so goes the state. That you couldn't have a success, or it would be very challenging, bordering impossible, to have a successful, vibrant New Hampshire with Manchester some kind of whole of non-economic whatever, the opposite of what it is today with economic vibrancy. But I'd like to talk about commuter rail, which is one of my bugbears. Do you have a thought on this topic?
Absolutely. We need it. And one of the big problems in our state across the board is that we're having trouble attracting and retaining young families to stay here. And part of the problem is our young people are leaving to go to college elsewhere because the tuition is too high. Part of the problem is the lack of affordable housing. And part of it is that transportation is not convenient in our state, public transportation especially. So in order to bring commuter rail in here is going to bring the young families that we want, the high earners, the people that are going to improve our communities and our schools, and it's going to allow people from across the economic spectrum to do better in their lives by having access to that kind of transportation. So I think it's a no-brainer that we need it.
Right. And you agreed? Right?
Yeah, I would say, you look pretty much anywhere in the country, and, home prices close to public transit are much higher than they are, further out. I agree, it would be great if I could, I have a job that allows me to work from home, but, I considered maybe a higher paying job in Boston. You have, I'm sure, many people who would love the quality of life that they get in Manchester,
Right.
the sort of, smaller city vibe, but still maybe a better paying job in Boston to start with, and then who knows, maybe they'll come and
What I find
found their own thing.
what I find frustrating is that speaking to political candidates who are opposed to commuter rail, or people like a former mayor Ted Gatsas, who's running for executive councillor against Gray Chynoweth. He will say, I'm fine with commuter rail, except that I don't want, it has to be private. So, that's as good as saying, whatever it is, I want rocket science, but I won't pay a penny for it. The problem is, and what I find frustrating is that the data is very clear. First of all, Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce and business writ large have said they need it and they want it, etc. Secondly, to your point about the economic advantage of it, that's clearly demonstrated and verifiable. If you look at the seacoast area and the effect that the Northeaster has had, which is demonstrable and measurable, etc., on that whole corridor. And if you look at property prices on the seacoast compared to here, you can tell that. And a second point I would make, and an example I would think should be more highlighted, is that recently the city of Worcester, which is 48 miles from Boston. Boston last week was named as the 7th most expensive real estate market in the world. Hong Kong was number 1. There are 5 others, and then you get to Boston. Wow. And as a result, the city of Worcester, another mill town in New England, the $2.8 billion worth of new taxable properties have been put on the roads, are planned on the property roads in Worcester over the last 2 years. Worcester has a growing population, not countering the previous narrative, which was a declining population in the area. And its downtown is booming. In Manchester, we have downtown booming, I think. Are doing very, very well. Worcester Airport is expanding. Ours is contracting. These issues need to be resolved, right?
Yeah, I think we are probably all see that Manchester is kind of, I feel, on the cusp of something, that
Right.
we're so close. We're heading in the right direction. I think we're going to get there, but we need support from infrastructure support from the state level and from the local level in order to make that final leap. And I think I read Manchester is the largest metro area in the country that is not served by rail.
Right.
And it's just that kind of fact is just it just shows you how out of touch that position is that you described earlier, that it's only going to happen if it's privatized. If we really want to make the push to being to get to the place where we can get, we all need to buy into this, and we all need to help make it happen, I think.
Good. I've said many times on this show, when we're not talking about education, which we're doing a little less of, but I've said many times, that given some of the players that we have making decisions on our behalf today, if the proposal to expand what was Grenier Field, what was originally Manchester Airport, when it was, a runway with some Nissan huts on the side of it, post World War II. If it had remained like that, and they were presented with a proposal to develop the airport in Manchester, the answer from people like Ted or others would be, well, yeah, I'd love to see an airport there, but go find someone else to pay for it, because New Hampshire won't.
Right. Yeah, it's a short-sighted view.
It is.
I think.
Yeah, and that's sort of leads into one of my big things, is I feel like our decision making at the city level and the state level has been just very short-sighted for a long time. We haven't really invested in, there's many things that research shows have fantastic payoffs, $15 that you gain for every dollar invested, arts for one, early
Right.
childhood education, and we just refuse to invest on that, and it's dumb. I mean, our government should be making smart long-term investments that, businesses either can't or won't for whatever reason.
Right. And the idea that it's economic benefit. You know, there are in businesses make decisions all the time based on the best knowable data, and there's always an element of risk. You know, some business moves forward by looking at opportunities, and they put resources against those opportunities. They don't get it right all the time. Government's not going to get it right all the time. But sitting on your hands saying, you know, we won't develop, puts you where, you know, people like GE today who are in all kinds of problems for that kind of reason, lots of risks, but we won't get into that. We're wandering far enough. Let's talk about a few other things that are sort of germane to anybody running in New Hampshire today. There's a couple I'd like to touch off. One would be the opiate crisis and what we're doing with that. So if we could touch on that, and then I'd also like to address at some point the issue of the environment and et cetera. But if we could, let's talk about the opiate crisis. So, your views of where we are and where we're going and how we're doing.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult issue. It's obviously one that we deal with in Manchester more than anywhere else in the state, and it's something that all parts of government and nonprofit sectors and health sectors are trying to work collaboratively towards, and I think there's some progress being made. There's no easy solution. I mean, it's better support for preventative education, for I think expanding Medicaid and protecting the Medicaid expansion is part of that, allowing for treatment. I mean, there's no easy solution. There's no silver bullet. It's a problem that we just need to keep getting our hands dirty and fighting is from all angles, I think.
Yeah.
So my criticism would be has been, first of all, it's difficult to have some conversations around it because there are a lot of people out there trying really hard and working way harder than they should. Lots of volunteers, lots of well-intentioned people. And so it's hard then to tell them that what we're doing isn't enough and is sort of, you know, misdirected or something. You know, the response of New Hampshire to the opiate crisis over the last 5 or 6 years has generally been, up until the last year or so, has generally been of one that we will talk about it. We'll create task forces and discussion groups, and we'll invite lots of charities and not qualified people in to help us as peer counselors and guides and whatever else. As I described 3 or 4 years ago in an interview with the BBC, talking about the opiate crisis in Manchester. To me, it was a statewide emergency that needed emergency funding, and therefore I expected to see bricks, mortar, hospital beds, qualified professionals, counsellors, etc. And there was none of that. And this goes back to actually Governor Hassan, who created the think tank or whatever you want to call it to do it. And well intentioned and all that, I know, but that group sat and talked for 6 months to come up with solutions, knowing that there was never going to be a proposal to spend dime one. There was zero money. It's, what are we going to do with the opiate crisis? But oh, by the way, sit in that room for 6 months, but don't come back and say you need $10. I hope that changes. I know that at the federal level there is some money coming in.
I mean, yeah, I think we need money that is, you know, earmarked for that, you know, very specifically allocated. I know, you know, our firefighters are doing a fantastic job, but it's too much pressure on them. They shouldn't have, that shouldn't be their job.
The whole nature of their job has changed in the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
It's more analogous to being on the front lines in Afghanistan or Iraq. And I don't want to overplay the dramatics about what's happening in Manchester, because what's happening in Manchester is happening across the country. We do suffer from this sort of I-95 corridor thing that people talked about. We're flitting over a lot of different stuff, and I'm trying to cover a lot of ground in like a half an hour or so. The environment. I as most people won't be surprised by this. I don't often talk about it here, but environmental issues, etc. I saw that the World Wildlife Fund, this is a long way from New Hampshire legislature, but just happens to be that today the World Wildlife Fund announced that 60% of all animals, mammals, vertebrates, invertebrates, it's in the planet, 60%. Now, I'm not talking about individual species, but of the great mass, 60% has been eliminated since the 1960s. So we've removed more than 50% of all. So soon the World Wildlife Fund will be managing four species or something. But that's a long way from your what you're going to be looking at. But there are impacts to everything from recycling policy to renewable energy to there's a huge issue, not issue, but you will be the guardians of the assets of the state in terms of forests and lakes and trees and rivers, etc.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's another place where, long-term investment, right? We can't keep saying, oh, let's, build this pipeline now because it'll, create a couple extra jobs now or, slightly lower our energy prices right now. It's let's invest for the long term in renewables that, will create jobs over the long term, and will have positive effects as we go. One of the reasons that we live in New Hampshire and love living in New Hampshire is because we are an hour from gorgeous beaches and really close to hiking and mountains,
right,
and can swim in clean water and fresh air. And call me crazy, but I think New Hampshire kids have a right to that, and my grandkids will, and great-grandkids, down the line.
And sorry, as I let you in, is that just one of the issues has been the increasing cost of going to public or state parks in the state of New Hampshire over time, which in the end, if only the people who can afford to spend 15 or 25, whatever dollars it is for a car to get in, are allowed to go there, then the great mass of people cannot. Is your thoughts on environmental issues and beyond?
Yeah, like Jackie said, I think especially in New Hampshire where the environment and our beautiful landscapes are part of our state's economy even.
Right.
It's certainly something that should be at the top of our priority list, not kind of a background issue where it'd be nice if we're environmentally conscious. It needs to be a priority, especially in. We saw the United Nations report that came out a few weeks ago that said this is a catastrophic problem, global climate change. This is a catastrophic problem. It needs to be dealt with now. And I'm a Democrat, obviously, and from my point of view, it's something where the government needs to be involved more. Right. We saw in the 70s and the 60s the problems with our air pollution. The government came down from the national level with the Clean Air Act. It said to the car manufacturers, you have to cut emissions by this 70% or 80%
right,
by this date. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You just need to do it. And there was a lot of complaining about it. Probably some people thought that's government overreach to tell a private industry what to do in caps like that. But it absolutely worked. And it's something where sometimes you just need government to get involved and say, we need to take some real steps here to solve this problem.
And I think that's a great point, because I think it's often forgotten, like where we've come from, right? If you look at, the condition of, say, the Great Lakes just a generation ago, the Hudson River Valley, you couldn't swim, you couldn't fish, you couldn't recreate on the Hudson River. You go to the Hudson River today and it's beautiful. But that again didn't happen. And I'm not anti-private enterprise at all. I not at all. I think that operating within the parameters of doing no harm to others is where we're trying to get at. But we see without mandating this from government, we end up with what we have, say, at the Rio Grande, a trickle of water left where there used to be a major river, or we go back to Lake Erie at a time when you'd had to hold your nose driving by it, and so that's where we are today, and we need to go back to understanding that.
Yeah, and honestly, I think a failure of having regulations there is really, it damages the business owners who want to do the right thing, because it just makes it a race to the bottom. So if you say this far and no further, then it's a more level playing field.
I think when you think about sort of the spectrum of ideas, or the way the pendulum swings, or any of those other sort of images, right? This idea that laissez-faire politics and laissez-faire markets, that business left to itself will deliver, through good intention, will deliver the common good, has never been borne out in history.
Or that we do a good job of pricing in externalities.
Yeah, exactly. We just don't. And so we do, when the example that you said about how today we drive, cars that don't use lead gasoline anymore. And our kids are healthy, and our cities are healthy, and our towns, as a result of it, our air is better.
Our murder rates are lower.
What's that?
I said our murder rates are lower because,
right. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize
Yeah.
there was a connection with that. Wow.
Yeah, that's a.
Well, so
I've thought it. Yeah.
right.
that
So
seems to
this
progress.
idea. So it's out there in the ether, you know, and like it's sort of a given, and it's terrible that one finds oneself in the position of trying to beat back what is sort of a common thought. It becomes common knowledge, but it doesn't bear scrutiny once scrutinized. I want to go someplace else because we are dancing around. Don't get too dizzy out there. We're still to. But,
Every issue.
but we have right now, as we're speaking tonight, there is a which is a national issue, but I want to bring it back locally, and that is the terrible and tragic shooting of people in a number of events. The Virginia event, the 11 people of the Jewish community killed in Pittsburgh, and of course the bombing issue, or the pipe bomb issue the week before. But right now, tonight, as we're speaking, if you're live watching this at 6:30 something on Tuesday, there is if you go on Facebook, it's being live streamed there. It's a commemoration or an acknowledgement in Pittsburgh. It's very moving. I watched it for a little bit before we came on here tonight, and you have an opportunity. As just one thing a private individual could do is go on Facebook Live and just hit friend or pal or something. But it's a terrible thing. But here we have here, and to bring it back to Manchester, I don't know if you saw, but in Ward 2, which both of you seek to represent, we had at Wagner Park, or Wagner Park, whichever way you'd like to pronounce it, 2 blocks from one of our synagogues here in the city, in Ward 2, we had a swastika painted on that this weekend, which is unconscionable. And it's unconscionable that the Wagner monument would be attacked to begin with, but then to put swastikas on it. I could ramble on, I don't want to be in righteous indignation or something, but I know it's low-hanging fruit, but it's a serious issue for the city of Manchester. There was a swastika. There was a store burnt out on the west side 2 years ago, and a swastika spray painted on the ruins. As you would say, hopefully, future representatives of the state and city of Manchester, your thoughts or words, please.
I don't know, what there is to say. Hopefully it is just, kids thinking they're being edgy and funny and something they'll grow out of. But I think if we've seen anything over the last 2 to 4 years, it's that we really need to come down on that hard and say that has no place here, absolutely cannot be tolerated, that sort of hateful and really intimidating, trying to make people feel like they don't belong here. I think
Right.
Manchester belongs to all of us. And
Right.
It's very sad to see, and obviously anywhere, but especially in our own community, a couple blocks away from us. It's sad to see, especially in Wagner Park, Pretty Park, we call it. Such a beautiful spot and kind of a real gem for our communities, especially. And to see someone kind of desecrate it like that is, like Jackie said, I hope it's just a dumb kid. That doesn't excuse it, but hopefully it's not someone truly with hate in their heart, because that would be just a sad thing for our community. Hopefully that person's caught and brought to justice.
I would like to say this. This is now Jim's editorial here. I have to say, first of all, I'm very conscious of sort of jumping on bandwagons and false righteousness and holier-than-thou-ness and all that stuff, and opportunism. It's somebody's real tragedy. There are people dead, and so people like me and others in the chattering class, I'm very conscious of that, of not wanting to, here's my shot to go off and sort of, but I do hear the thoughts and prayers thing is driving me nuts. It's wearing so thin, the response of thoughts and prayers and shock and horror. The problem in the city, to bring it back to Manchester, is this, is that there is a level of invective. There is a level of conversation going on in the public discourse in Manchester which is intolerable. Now, I don't want to add to it by naming names here tonight. Not that I'm afraid to do that, but I just don't want to do that. It doesn't help for me, because then the story becomes, somebody named John X, right? And now it's like, well, I don't want to go there. So it's not about that. But for those who are listening and those who are watching and those who know, and especially the people who are doing it, when there are public representatives, elected public representatives from the city of Manchester on social media using profane language, speaking intolerantly about people of other faiths. It was Muslims last week. It might be Jewish people this week, and it could be, Christians the week after that. But this is. I'm sorry you're sitting here while I'm saying this to the people who are watching, but I am very unhappy, bordering on very cross. I actually am very cross about the fact that our public representatives who sit around. They're meeting tonight at 7 o'clock at City Hall, the Aldermen are. Many of them are my friends. I know all of them. The fact that there are people sitting at that table who have been adding to the fires of intolerance and anti-immigrant feeling, etc. And I just think that people like yourselves, maybe not tonight, but when you're sitting with others in Concord, the idea of just letting it go and he's just being him is not good enough, or she's being her. We have it on the school board, we have it on the board of mayor and aldermen, and those people, I wouldn't ever accuse them of intentionally seeking to harm anybody. I don't think that's not their. There's no evidence for that. But let's be clear also. Just like our president would say that he's not doing anything to cause any of this, there's no question about what his rhetoric is doing. So I would ask you, my plea to you, as people who will be sitting in Concord, is to be aware of this going on around you and call it out when you see it.
Yeah, and not engage in it ourselves. I certainly have strong feelings about many topics, but I try to be open to, others when they discuss and focus on the facts and actual impacts, as opposed to, just the rhetoric and thinking more about what somebody does than, who they are in terms of.
I think though, Jackie, and I agree with you, but it's like, I don't know if we're the nice people or not, but that's we kind of say. But we, the nice people, which I think is 95%, 99%, whatever the number is, because we're not looking for an argument. We're not trying to be strident. We don't want to get into personal arguments, and I don't want us to change from that. But I think the current circumstance demands of us that I think our tolerance has been, and our unwillingness to go there, has meant that some people have now taken license to say things they never would before. I don't see any problem, just to bring it back to a place where you won't be, at least in this election period. In the city of Manchester, I don't think there's any reason why the Board of Mayor and Aldermen could not, privately first and then publicly if it wasn't successful, let it be known to 1, 2 or 3 aldermen who are using profane and foul language and calling people names on Facebook and other social media to say that's not a way to represent the city. Yeah. And when you end up going into the rooms you're going into in Concord, and while we all respect our public representatives, there are deviants there. There are predators who've come out of there. There's been all kinds of illegal activities going on there. I mean, I hate to malign the 400 people. There are lots of decent people there. Many of them we all know, and it's a reputable place. But there needs to be shouting from the mountaintops about some of the behaviour has to stop.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It reflects. And there are representatives that reflects on the community. You're right that it's easy to kind of just shake your head and poo-poo it, or say it's not a great thing. But in a lot of situations, you're right that we would all be a lot better off if we spoke up and said that's not okay. That's not something that we're going to allow in our community, and we would all be a lot better off. So you're right.
Yeah, this is sort of my thought for you, because I think if I had the honour to represent the people of New Hampshire I wouldn't want to add to the kind of invective and anger and personal insult. So I'd be very careful not to do that. But I also wouldn't, by acquiescence, sort of lend whatever to it. How do we get down that rabbit hole? I don't know. So let's talk about. So what is there something else you'd like to address? Is there a topic that's dear to you? We haven't talked about the issue with regard to the VA and veterans, etc. Insofar as the House will have effect on that. Thoughts in that area?
Sure. I mean, well, not in that area specifically, but I guess I could talk about something that's important to me, and that's certainly a very serious issue. For me, honestly, it's from a personal level, it's education, because my parents are both public school teachers, and my brother's a public school teacher. And I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm not sure that folks realize or fully appreciate when they're in my position, where you don't have kids yet, so it may not directly affect you, the quality of the public schools or support for public schools. But it really is kind of the linchpin of the community, and the thing that makes everything go well in a community is when we have great public schools, we support our great teachers, and we have great families in our area, that's communities that are safe and well supported. So if elected, and hopefully I'll have the honor, supporting our public schools will definitely be a priority for me.
Good. Thank you. It's what I do. I only come here on, every week on Tuesday night to talk about education, because I feel very similarly. To me, it's the essence, it's the core, it's the key determining factor in great communities, is having great public schools and in having great individuals to make great communities. Jacqueline.
I absolutely agree. I guess one thing, so going back a little bit to the incident in Pittsburgh, one thing that I am very passionate about addressing also is having sane, sensible gun safety laws. It kind of blew my mind that the first bill that was signed in the last session with Chris Sununu as governor was to make concealed carry less stringent, more open to anybody.
Right.
I kind of can't fathom why you have these weapons and wouldn't want them to be accessible only to people who can use them responsibly. So that would be for sure something that
and one of the things I would say is that one of the places that the legislature can play here is that under current New Hampshire law, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, or in particular, say, the school board here in Manchester, cannot enact an ordinance which requires our schools to be gun-free. Mm-hmm. Now, I cannot understand how, if we're having a concert at Smith Road for second graders, that some mom or dad shows up with, hey, you can have a long gun, you can walk in there with, and you're allowed by law to bring an AR-15 in there, or a Glock, or whatever you want. And it blows my mind that is, and it seems to me, talk about low-hanging fruit. At very minimum, those who would claim to say local control, then why is it when it comes to this, there is no local control? Nashua, as you might have seen, is looking at this and seeing what they can do right now. There are objections in Nashua to a proposal which is to have administrators call the Nashua Police Department when anybody shows up with a gun at a school. So they're not allowed by law to ban them from there. But even that's controversial for some on the far right who say the police shouldn't even be called. Why are you calling police on a law-abiding citizen?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a shame, because I think common sense gun safety proposals like that, like not allowing, being able to prohibit at a local level guns in schools, like you said, should not be that controversial in my opinion anyway.
Right.
And in New Hampshire, we have a proud tradition of gun ownership, of hunting. No one's arguing from our side that the Second Amendment is wrong or it's not a constitutional right. What we want is just common sense. I mean, that is something that should be uncontroversial and we should be able to agree on. Let's keep our kids safe in school.
Yeah.
When you
well,
sorry,
can
go
I
ahead,
just
please.
one other thing? And so I guess, keep kids safe in school is one thing that we all agree on, but the proposals to achieve that by arming teachers or, having armed guards outside of every school, what kind of a safe learning environment is that really for kids? Like, what does it tell them that, you really, the drills are bad enough, but having to walk by an armed gunman to get to kindergarten is absurd.
My house isn't full of people every night. We don't have people around all the time. But over the 22 years since I bought my house, there have been a few people come by for dinner. those of you, the 99% of you who never have, it hasn't been that many. But anyway, the point is, no one has ever let a gun fall to the floor by accident under the dining room table or kitchen table in my house. It's just never happened. It's happened twice in the House of Representatives in Concord. Just think about this for a minute. Like, this is reality, right? There was a guy who subsequently was found out to be a drug dealer, amongst other things, who was a representative in the House just in the last 5 years, who was wearing 2 guns, one under each shoulder, like some cheap Western. This guy was tolerated, and people smiled at him and talked with him seriously about politics, and he was a public representative in Concord, and that's how he walked around with bandoliers and guns in each shoulder, and that was seen not as a comedy. It wasn't Saturday Night Live. This was New Hampshire House. Yeah. And he was in a committee meeting while there were third graders in the room, and one of his guns fell to the floor, and he picked it up. And so, so I only say that not to beat up on our legislature. It is to illustrate the presumption that people have that there are rational, that everybody in the conversation in Concord is actually a level-headed, sane, rational person. I think anybody who goes to a legislative session with 2 guns and bandoliers and then goes beyond that and can't even look after him has him fall to the floor. There was a lady representative whose gun also fell out of her waistband and dropped to the floor of another meeting. So, that doesn't happen. I don't know if it's ever happened in your house. It's never happened in mine. And so, these are some. I think what I'm really saying, I guess, is not to treat you in any sense as though I know more than you or something. I hope it doesn't. I don't want to come across like that. I think a lot of people who are at home eating their spaghetti or whatever it is they're having for dinner and maybe watching, I think most people who don't pay attention to all this stuff presume that they elect people to public office and that there are well-intentioned, albeit with very differing opinions, but rational people making decisions on their behalf. My admonition to them to go out and vote is that there are people like you running, and I like you both, and and your stances. There are people who are less thoughtful, who are running against you or against others. So I'm going to bring this to a close now that we've covered almost most of our hour. Believe it or not, we've gotten to 6:52. But if you please add whatever you would like to add. Is there something you'd like? Well, let's sort of a closing statement thing if you'd like. That would be great. And address the folks and tell them why they should come vote for you on Tuesday.
Sure. You want me to go first?
Yeah, okay. Sure. I open, so.
Well, thanks again for having us, Jen. This has been great. It's always good to be able to get the word out about us. So, I would just say that it's important to have, as you said, thoughtful legislators up there in Concord representing you. Also, people that are possibly a little bit more diverse, whether it's an age or socioeconomic status or background or whatever. Our legislature up in Concord is not really that right now, which is fine. There's a lot of experienced people up there who do a great job, but it's also good to have younger people or for people from different backgrounds. So one thing that I'll always pledge is I'll work hard up in Concord. I'll be thoughtful, as you said, and it's not about party. It's not about corporate interests or partisan interests or special interests. It's about, for us, working for our communities and helping the city and our state reach the level which we believe it can reach. So that's what we're hoping to do up in Concord.
Thank you.
That's great. I will say, like I mentioned before, I'm a busy mom. I work full-time, mom of 3. Honestly, this is not the greatest time in my life to be taking on something else, especially something that requires as much commitment as running for office, but I'm doing it because I love Manchester, I love New Hampshire, and I really think that there is a lot that we can do, and hopefully that I can bring to make it a place where everyone can thrive and we're all able to contribute our best. I also want to make sure we give a shout out to our running mates. So one of the great things about our massive legislature. Each district is, or each ward in Manchester anyway, is represented actually by 4 representatives. So I'm running alongside Matt Wilhelm in District 42.
And I'm alongside one of our incumbents, Linda DeSilvestro, who does a great job in Ward 2. So
Yeah.
you can vote for all 4 of us, Ward 2 residents.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Could
Ward
you
1, 2,
actually
3,
explain
4.
to me what I think of it, because I should know this, and it just goes to show I'm not as smart as I think. I never think I know it all at all, but I think I know a little bit sometimes, and I find out I know a little less. So it's been a lifetime of finding out that I know less than I thought I did. The Flotario, so it's easy to understand, right? Like you run in Ward 2, so each ward has got representatives who represent the ward. But what is the Flotario, and what is it? How does that work?
Yeah, I think it's essentially to make sure that the representation is completely proportional. So there are a couple of flotarial districts that encompass Manchester. So there's mine and Matt's, wards 1, 2, and 3. Then there's another one that's wards 4, 5, 6, and 7,
Right.
I believe. And then there's another that's 8, 9, and Litchfield. And another flotarial that is like the whole west side. I believe I've gotten those boundaries right. Apologies.
Right. And those, right,
not
and those are multi-people. So you've got again multiple people. So representing
Right, so
Ward 2,
two
there will be 2
each
people
district.
represent Ward 2, and then 2 flotarials
Right.
for each of those group of districts,
Exactly.
right?
So every ward gets 2 and a third, I
Right.
guess. And then in other towns, there's flotarials that encompass multiple towns. Some places like Merrimack, I think they can vote for 10, I want to
Right.
say. So
One of the
it's
things that
very
people should be
different.
conscious of when they're looking at this is, first of all, don't stop when they get to, executive councillor.
Yes.
We've got great Chinawit running for executive councillor. People will go and vote for the congressional race. They'll vote for executive councillor. I hope they vote. It's important. And then
going all the way down,
keep going all the way
register,
down.
probate.
And think about it.
We
And it-
We say start from the bottom,
and
actually.
move up.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
yeah,
the best
that's
way.
yeah. Because and one of the things, especially when you look at those flotarial districts that have non-Manchester pieces, from Litchfield as an example, and without presuming anything about that, is that when you have you have a choice as a Manchester voter to vote for people who are based in Manchester from that flotarial district or who are not. Well, we've come to the end of our. We're right down at the end of the show. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us for another evening. As I said, this program goes out multiple times between now and November 6th. And November 6th, Tuesday, whatever day that is from the time you're looking at this, please, 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 it's very important. Go out and vote. Be thoughtful in who you're voting for. Put a little time into it. But in any case, if you don't, ask a friend, a good friend. But please go out and vote, and the world could all change on the morning of the 7th if the right decisions were made for us on November 6th. So thank you for listening tonight. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Liz. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All right. Good night, folks. All the best now. See you next week.